Welcome to Clans and Dynasties. On this channel I will do clan histories, family trees and tell stories of our ancestors from Ireland, Scotland and more. So please leave a like and I hope you enjoy. The year in 941 AD and the small Irish kingdom of Thomond, history is being made. The River Shannon is calm as the cries of a newborn echo along its banks from Killaloe. Brian Boru is born. His father, King Kennetic of the Dog Gosh, a small, less renowned tribe of Thomond, looks to expand his prestige in a land where lineage is everything. The winds of change are blowing. Kennetic is drinking to the birth of another son and looking to expand on his kingdom. He has grown rich and powerful thanks to the growing influence of the Vikings of Limerick and the trade they bring along the banks of his kingdom. With Viking allies to the south, his daughter orders marriage to Don Hugh of Clan Coleman, King of Meath, and Kennetic's marriage to the Princess Bévine, daughter of King M.R.I.A of Connacht, who protects his north. He looks almost ready to challenge his overlords, the Munster tribe of Munster. Brian would spend his summers learning to fight and hunt with his older brothers, in the winters sit and listen to stories of Irish heroes past. He was sent to the Abbey of Innisfallen to study as a young man. When Brian was 11, he received word his father was dead. The Munster, seeing Brian's father as a threat, allied themselves with the Danes and attacked the family fortress, killing Kennetic in a brutal and bloody raid. It was time to bury the dead, and Brian was called home. Brian's brother, MacAvan, took the throne. He had walls and alliances to rebuild. 4 years later, dragon boats were spotted along the Shannon River. The warning bells on the church rang, but it was too late. Brian and MacAvan were on the hills. They heard the cries and ran to help. The Danes were ruthless. Fast and viciously they attacked. Brian's mother shielded the young, while her sons fought with shields and spears, but they were outmatched. The Vikings disappeared as quick as they had come, shielded by the smoke of the burning fortress. Brian and his two brothers ran through the bloody streets. There, at their home, lay their mother's bleeding body, and he swore vengeance. The Danes had moved further south and now attacked their old allies the Munster, taking town after town of vassals in Thomond. The Dalcassians, led by MacAvan, refused to bend the knee. They took to the hills and started their bloody guerrilla campaign. The long war started, but after years it seemed like a lost cause. Defeat seemed inevitable, until 962 AD, when Ossory, a tributary kingdom of Leinster, came to the rescue by inflicting a crushing defeat on the Norsemen. MacAvan welcomed the opportunity to negotiate a truce with the Vikings. Brian, however, could not forget his murdered family and opposed his sign of weakness. Brian, at the age of 21, with only 100 followers, left his brother's side and wandered back into the mountains to resist the Danes or die trying. He had made a promise and he would not submit again. MacAvan was using the truce to his advantage, and while his brothers kept the Vikings distracted, he built up his power base to take on the once all-powerful Munster. Brian's war band was pursued mercilessly. His reputation had grown and he had become a threat the Vikings needed to stop. By the end of the winter, Brian had only 15 followers, but he still would not put down the sword. MacAvan, upon seeing his brother's conviction to fight these foreign invaders of Ireland, relented and rejoined forces with his brother. But Brian was no longer his little brother. He was a seasoned soldier and leader. So, in 964 AD, they took the fight to King Ivar of Limerick. There followed 4 years of war, ending in the decisive Battle of Solchoid. The Norsemen, under their leader Ivar, began their assault at sunrise, but the Irish lines refused to break before crushing the Vikings. Brian and MacAvan marched on Limerick in the dark. The city surrendered without resistance. They butchered and burned without mercy. The spoils were plentiful, but Ivar escaped. With his foes in flight, MacAvan was proclaimed King of Munster. With his allies and loyal brother Brian, he set about securing his claim. 6 years the Munster were back, with their allies the King of Desmond. They ambushed MacAvan on a lonely mountain pass, piercing his heart with a lowly assassin's blade. Brian, upon hearing his brother's death, stated, "His murderers shall forfeit life for this deed, or I shall perish by a violent death." First to feel Brian's wrath was Ivar, who had sought sanctuary in Enniscather. He was suspected of being involved in the murder. Brian, ignoring the laws of sanctuary, attacked the abbey, fortress and surrounding islands. Brian challenged Ivor to a personal combat. The duel was hard fought, but Ivor was beaten. His two sons lay dead as the Irish pillaged around them. Brian hunted down the Inachta allies one by one. He sacked Limerick again, while his eldest son Murchad hunted the countryside for any more Viking bands. Brian rode to Cashel and was crowned king under the royal tree, but there was no time to rest. His kingdom was in turmoil. Battles were fought, political enemies hunted down, and alliances were made, including with the remaining Inachta. As King of Munster, Brian faced new and more dangerous rivals. Munster and the Danes of Limerick may have been subjugated, but to the north there were more Norse strongholds and other powerful Irish kingdoms. In 979 AD, Brian instigated a war with Leinster by demanding an 800-year-old tribute that Leinster owed the King of Munster. When Leinster refused to swear allegiance to Munster or pay the required 300 gold handled swords, cows with brass yokes and horses and cloaks, Brian invaded. Meanwhile, a new superpower was forming. The new High King of Ireland, 32-year-old Mael Sheachlan MacDonald II, was determined to quash anyone who questioned his authority. In 983 AD, he had Munster in his sights. He attacked Cashel and uprooted the Munster royal tree as a warning to Brian to stay quiet and within Munster. Brian responded by raiding the High King's territory. For 15 years the raids and counter-raids ensued, neither gaining the advantage. During this time, Brian allied himself with his old enemies the Vikings of Waterford and attacked the kingdom of Connacht. After defeating Connacht, he took the king's daughter as his wife to secure the new subjects' loyalty. During the 15-year war, Brian lost twice to the High King in pitched battle, but Mael Sheachlan could never deliver the killing blow. In 998 AD, they sought to end the fighting. While the Irish kingdoms killed each other, the Vikings of Dublin were growing stronger. Brian and Mael Sheachlan made an uneasy alliance and agreed to split the rule of Ireland, with Mael Sheachlan's titular rule of the north and Brian to remain in control of the south. They set off to attack the Dublin and Leinster alliance and make sure that they remained the only contenders for the High Kingship. At the Battle of Glaonmama, the battle was decisive. The Dublin and Leinster forces were crushed, but Brian claimed the battle honours and Dublin bent the knee to him. The city was sacked and the riches filled Brian's vaults. Sigtryg of Dublin and King Muir of Leinster were allowed to keep their kingdoms as tributaries to Brian. Brian turned his attention back to the High Kingship of Ireland, and in 1000 AD he declared war on Mael Sheachlan, using the River Shannon to attack Connacht and Meath simultaneously. In 1002 AD he sent an ultimatum to the High King to relinquish the crown of Ireland. Mael Sheachlan, unable to find any allies to fight with him against Brian, even amongst his kin the Northern O'Neill of Ulster, was forced to accept. Brian was High King of all Ireland except one province, Ulster, for now. The new High King spent a decade rebuilding the war-ravaged Ireland, building schools, fortresses and bridges. He was a devout Christian and built many monasteries. While rebuilding the rest of Ireland, he set about preparing his Ulster campaign, but it was going to be tough, as the Irish in the north had a long history of war. In 1005 AD, after a bloody campaign, the longest he had to endure, even with the resources from the rest of Ireland, but he finally received the submission from Ulster kings, and the most powerful, Flaherty O'Neill, bent the knee and pledged fealty. But in 1006, Brian was forced to return again to bring Flaherty O'Neill to heel, and again in 1007 AD, forcing Brian to take hostages and give him his daughter's hand in marriage to bring the Ulster king in line. But again in 1009 AD, he raided the Midland territories. This forced Brian to return again, take more hostages. This finally brought the Ulstermen under control. Brian now ruled Ireland in its entirety. All 151 kings paid him tribute. But this was short-lived. A rebellion in Dublin and Leinster, the old alliance reforged, wanted to gain independence. Mael Sheachlan, still king of Meath, stayed loyal to his High King and attacked Dublin but was defeated. Brian called the clans to war. he laid siege to Dublin, but the walls could not be taken. He was forced to withdraw as supplies were low and winter was coming. Dublin called the Vikings of Orkney and the Isle of Man for support, as they knew Brian would be back. He returned with an army of Meath and Munster men, as Connacht and Ulster refused to send any, although some men still picked up the spear for their king. The King of Scotland sent men to assist Brian, his friend and fellow soldier, in arms against the heathen Vikings. With his 5,000 men, the war began. Southern Leinster refused to assist the rebels, leaving the Viking Leinster army with only 3,000 men. Brian split off some of his forces under leadership of his son Donogh to guard the south. He then camped on the hill beside Dublin. The war council sat and argued over tactics. This argument became so heated, especially between M.R.I.A, Brian's eldest son and heir, and Wales Shocklin, King of Meath, that he and the men of Meath withdrew from battle. This left the forces equal in size, meaning Brian had lost his numerical supremacy. He called his son Donogh back, but he knew they had never arrived in time. Brian was 73 years old, too old to lead his men into battle. He would depend on his eldest son M.R.I.A, a seasoned and proven warrior and leader, but he was known to be reckless and brave to a fault. The Dublin and Leinster alliance saw its opportunity to attack. They knew they had to attack before Brian's reinforcements arrived. On Good Friday, the Battle of Clontarf began. Brian wished his sons, nephews, and even his 15-year-old grandson Turla luck as he prayed with them before they marched to battle. The battle was long and brutal. Shield against axe, spear against chainmail, no man gave an inch. The lines of the two armies held firm, neither caving under the pressure. Many kings, princes and sons of Ireland, rich and poor, spilt their blood at Clontarf, but finally the Munster army broke through the Dublin lines and forced the army to flee. Brian received word his sons and grandson had been killed in the fighting. Brian, heartbroken, mourning, didn't realise the Vikings were fleeing past his tent. One Viking entered, wide-eyed with fear and anger, fell upon the aged man with his page boy, killing both. The battle had claimed so much, maybe more than people would realise. A dynasty lay broken. Donogh arrived on the Sunday. Only Cian of Inachta remained of the council to tell him of his father's death and that his brothers and nephews had died in battle. He buried his father in a marble coffin in Armagh. After 12 days of masses throughout the land, all men of Ireland donned their armour and headed to their king's halls. The wars of succession were about to begin.